Thank you, John. Good afternoon, everybody. So this is an update on some of the things that we've been doing internationally. So we're the face of ARIN outside in government engagement in all of the international organizations that are talking about the internet. As you can see from this slide, this is basically what government engagement is supposed to do: improve working relations in ARIN region and globally. So when we go sit in ITU, it's funny, this morning when we were having the discussion around RPKI, it reminded me of how when John was talking about how he could see himself, talking in front of the jury, having to advocate for RPKI, I felt like this is very much like how I feel every single time we get a question up at ITU or OECD. If you do, you're doomed. If you don't, you're doomed. That's really what happens every single time when we go there. So we try to make sure that we keep John, and the executive team apprised of what is going on internationally, so we can react also, effectively with the board and all of you here. So I'll talk about most of the meetings that you see here, and there. Before I talk about PP, I'm going to talk a little bit, just give you an anecdote that just happened yesterday. I am part of a group of folks that from time to time give online trainings to governments. And the first week is always devoted to telling them about the infrastructure, what is the internet, how it works, and all of that. And yesterday we had to basically go and look into a question and respond to a clarification on what is a packet as opposed to a package. You get, So you get a package to get connected to the internet from your provider, your connectivity provider. And then you get packets, when on the infrastructure. So, but English being English, you also, when you have a package, you receive packets. So it was, quite a little laugh that we had yesterday, trying to explain infrastructure on which you can get package and packets both delivered. So it's part of the, having to explain how the infrastructure works. So going back to ITU, International Telecommunication Plenipotentiary 18, some of the most salient points for us, well, the geopolitical rift state. I think you all know that we are still at the point where we have a lot of people who believe that telecommunications today should include internet, and others who believe adamantly that it shouldn't be the case. So that rift is still there, and whenever we talk about telecommunications, it's always hard to kind of see where do you stop in talking about telecom, and where does the internet come, and what do you include or not in there. So the positioning basically continued, and we had very long hours and pretty contentious language in all of the internet resolutions that are at ITU. We ended up having minor edits in resolutions 101 on internet protocols, 102 internet protocols and names, domain names, 133 around international domain names, and 180 that is specifically about talking about IPv6 that got a title change that was that is now called Promoting Deployment and Adoption of IPv6 to Facilitate the Transition from IPv4 to IPv6. Long title to accommodate everybody and make everybody equally unhappy. That's what success is deemed to be in government world. So the reason why I'm telling you about the rest of the resolutions that are here, one is on OTT, is that, again, out there when you talk about the internet, and mostly to, regular folks, including a lot of government people, internet is a monolith, okay? They don't make a difference between Google and ARIN. They're all the same. For them, it's internet, okay? So if you say OTT, it means somehow, somewhere, we're all included. And that's the reason why we have to be there to say, no, no, hold on. This is how it works, okay? This is the layer above. This is what we do. And by the way, I was also a little, I was smiling to myself listening to the conversation about monetizing IPv4. If that was to ever take place, it would put us squarely into what is happening on the discussions globally around taxation, because we would be making money. So these are all things that we have to always be, reading very carefully. When people say the devil is in the details, I say the devil is in where the comma is placed. That's how it works in government language. So, when we're talking about OTT, it depends on, where they put the comma or where the telecom stops, where the, what could be deemed internet starts. And then it can be either relevant or not for us. There was a possible merger of two council working groups that was proposed and finally didn't happen. But at least we got instruction to streamline resolutions. When you go to ITU, so ARIN is a member of ITU-T, the standard sector, and ITU-D, development, where they do a lot of capacity building. Well, if you take IPv6, when it's the standards, in the standards world, they're talking about how to do IoT, how to do everything that can go through the internet via 6 tomorrow. And in the D sector, we get to talk about capacity building. How do you get to tell people about how to actually implement, deploy V6 and all of that. And in between, we end up having work streams that are lengthy, that take a lot of time, that take a lot of energy, that take a lot of money, because believe me, Geneva is one of the, is not the cheapest place to have meetings. And we have to be there constantly to explain, no, you can't do this. Actually, if you put this type of language, you are saying you're going to be doing policy for IP addressing. Sorry, this is not your job, it is ours. We've been doing this. This is actually the community. This is, where people should go do it, not here, and so on and so forth. So cybersecurity, you heard from APNIC and everybody there, it's all over. What is security is up to whom you ask, to be honest today. And artificial intelligence was something that is very contentious because, of course, it involves anything that all the talk from, data privacy to, name it. And today we're in there because, yeah, we're part of the talk about, who is and what goes in there and all of that. So council working groups, just to give you an idea, we have a council working group that is called Council Working Group Internet. It's basically international internet public policies related to the internet. And traditionally, this is a working group where the council members, council at ITU is the body that in between two plenipots, so in between 4-year meetings, basically expedite the work at ITU as the highest body. So in the group that is talking about the internet, traditionally they have talked about anywhere from what has happened at WSIS policies, generic policies on on the internet, to this time, for example, one theme that they wanted to talk about was IPv6, but even that being like the least controversial item couldn't get them to agree to talk about it, because they came out of Plenipot with the positioning that I was telling you about, and quite a few were for and quite a few were against. So the full council that is meeting in 2 months, in June, will have to decide what this council working group is going to be talking about for the next year. We have the same council meeting in June. We'll be deciding on the ITRs, so the International Telecommunication Regulations Working Group. The last one couldn't agree on do we do revisions of the international telecommunication regulations, of which we have 2 sets, one dating from 1998. And I think a lot of you remember what happened when we got the 2012 ones, which was ITRs 2012, where we got the real contentious issues and the total split in opinions. So council will decide, the expert working group, and also something called the expert working group for the World Telecommunication Policy Forum. The World Telecommunication Policy Forum is just a meeting that happens episodically. The SG calls for it, the Plenipot agrees to it, and then council decides, and they have decided it's going to take place in 2020. Actually, Plenipot decided it's going to take place in 2020, and council will now decide on what we are going to talk about at that policy forum. Thank God it's not a policy forum that comes out with policies that are mandatory. But everybody, it's multi-stakeholder. We can put papers towards that, and we all get to participate, as we actually participated in 2013 at the last one. And then we have this year the anniversary of the WSIS Forum, and also we have the WSIS Forum working with the UN High-Level Policy Forum at UNGA, the United Nations General Assembly, to have a theme this year that is about empowering people and ensuring inclusiveness and equality. Make no mistake, inclusiveness and equality may sound like something just mundane, but it is talking about all of the issues that you're seeing that are talked about, for example, algorithms, and issues that people are having behind algorithms, fake news, and all of this stuff. So this is all will be debated at the High-Level Policy Forum. ITUT and the work that we do there, we participate mostly to Study Group 2, Study Group 20, and we monitor very closely. When I say we monitor very closely, we mostly participate online. So very early days for a lot of times for Einar and I, because Geneva is 6 hours ahead, and we try and participate as much as we can in Study Group 3 and Study Group 13. 13 because it's all about future networks and what they call trusted network infrastructure, as opposed to probably ours that is not that trusted at the moment. So, you have new ideas on actually platforms that could either work or not work with TCP/IP, and, or DNS and all of that, and you have quite a few people, participating in the focus groups and study group 13. And we participate to the TSAG, that is basically, again, in between two plenipotentiaries. TSAG is the one that basically collates all the work that the 11 study groups in ITUT are doing. So in ITUD, we just finished the work of the first meetings of study group 1 and study group 2, and TDAG also. And we got a lot out of there on IPv6 and capacity building going forward. So we will be going to CTEL, and I know that Kevin is here, and he talked to you about some of the work that they're doing. We will all be talking to CTEL and the Organization of American States, where we participate, because they have a lot of capacity building initiatives on IPv6 and networks and resiliency in general. That has become a really big thing in the whole region because of emergency telecommunications in general. Some of the conferences that we will participate in, or not actually, in 2019. So Bevel was in Mauritius lately to talk about some of the work that we've been doing in the Caribbean on helping in resiliency of networks. And we were not the only ones. Afrinic was there to also talk about some of the work that they're doing in, with their island states. And I know that APNIC has been working also with the regional office in the Asia Pacific on the same issue. We will be participating into the Global Symposium for Regulators, where the theme this year is inclusive connectivity and the future of regulation. One of the issues that we keep having is a lot of the policies, that ITUD and does and, takes out there for regulators to implement, often, have issues just because the regulators themselves don't really talk to the community on the ground, do not really know sometimes where implementing a policy can break a system, so on and so forth. So we do work with them as closely as possible, because they come as much as possible to Geneva for study groups, either in T or in D, and we really try to work with them on that. Radio communication assemblies and World Radio Communication Conferences will be in October and November this year. These are mostly spectrum, so we don't go to those, but we monitor, because, the end product of whatever it is, that comes out for these devices that are connected afterwards anywhere touches us. So OASCTEL, as I said, we work with them, and we have a working group on policies and regulations. We will be putting 2 contributions to them that will be around IPv6, but also some of the issues that we have seen in study group 2 and study group 20 at ITU, because it is the regional work of what is going on globally at ITU is taken down to the regions by OSCTEL. So some of the issues that we see, with some of the governments like Canada, or even the US and Brazil and others, for example, we talk also about in there to say, we've seen this, it will be important that you take some other factors into account if you're doing that for the region. Working group on deployment of technologies and services. Again, if they need here training, we're there to provide that with LACNIC. And we have a working group on preparation of conferences, where basically the region sits and look into what is happening, what has happened, for example, at World Telecommunication Development Conference that was in 2017 at Plenipot. What were the resolutions that were deemed important for the region? How do we translate them on the ground? And how do we collate them into the World Telecommunication Standardization Assembly or the future work on the international telecommunication regulations and so forth? We go with all of the technical community. The technical community is actually participates into the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, as ITAC, the Internet Technical Committee at OECD. Includes ARIN, ICANN, all of the IRRs, I think, and IEEE and a few others. So we participate in the discussions on Going Digital. We have participated in Going Digital, the Going Digital project at OECD that has been happening for the past 2 years. And what that entails is, we just finished with a final synthesis report. We have a publication on measuring the digital transformation, and there is a Going Digital kit. Meantime, what has happened, and that is going to continue, is that we have all of the OECD member countries agreeing to look into all of their sectors at home to see what is it they have done in terms of connectivity, policies, e-commerce, name it, everything that is digitalized today and how well they are doing, according to what is in, the synthesis report that we came out with. It was kind of surprising to see, for example, some of the European countries that were the first, one of them particularly, that was happy to play the game and be the first one to be audited, quote unquote, by themselves and their full community at home, who were the first adopters of V6 to completely plateau today. And some of the things that we got out of that audit, national audit that was done by themselves, was to see that even in places where you have not only government but industry willing to go for it, there's always, roadblocks in terms of if it is cost, if it is just simply, for example, this country is a federation. So, they have things going a little bit like in the US. So federal, state, local governments and all of that, and people just putting different priorities onto what they want to do, which just, today has put that country at an average, level of adoption of V6. So it's it will be interesting to see what the others come out with in the same vein. And so another theme that we're following at OECD is the taxation one, where you have more than 100 countries that are agreeing to work towards a consensus-based solution. And in there, I promise you, they're looking at the chain of actors in the internet, anywhere from, yes, the IP addresses to all the rest. So if we were to be, again, looking to monetize IP addresses, I think will be looked at a little bit more closely than now. United Nations. Well, United Nations also is getting to talk about the internet today. At the third committee of United Nations General Assembly, you have, major developments. 2 resolutions on cybersecurity were adopted last year, one proposed by Russia, the other by the US. And both were voted on, both were adopted. One has a group of experts, the UN government group of experts, to be piloted by the US. That is continuing. It was something that actually has been going on for the past at least 4 years. That never really got to have consensus. And Russia has proposed the open-ended working group that is right now in the process of also being formed, and we're not too sure what is going to give. Again, as I told you, cybersecurity really means anything and everything to, people. It depends on who you ask. So we'll see what that gives. And we have a range of internet-related human rights issues. So in there, it's about looking at, the accountability processes. Are we responsible when we give an ISP a block of IP addresses and those are used, to do bad stuff? Where does our accountability start and where does it stop? Same if you look at, for example, the issue of IP addresses monetization. Regional internet registries say, we manage that space. So why is it that people get to sell IP addresses when we were having the same discussion this morning, when, you guys have said from the beginning that these are not to be monetized, that, any of the identifiers that are not used should come back to the global pool. So these are some of the issues that, we're facing every single day in terms of accountability and all of that. And that's why we also have to be part of the discussion and make sure that people understand that, things have evolved, and maybe we just should all sit around and, talk about the future of this space together. So the first committee of the UNGA has a development of international norms also in cyberspace. The 73rd session of the United Nations General Assembly that is happening now is significant in quite a few ways. It has 10 resolutions that are addressing internet issues. 2 on security, 2 on sustainable development, 2 on human rights, 4 on human rights, 1 on crime, and you have the cybersecurity and cybercrime that I talked about. You have also the geopolitical dynamics, whereby while we're talking about things that should be all discussed together, all of us together, what you hear more and more at UNGA is sovereignty. I'm sovereign, I can do what I want. This is my jurisdiction, I can do what I want. So, to be honest, at the moment, we're not too sure where this is going to lead us, but it's out there. So what happens to the multi-stakeholder model? Really not sure going forward. Other UN organizations where, talk of internet is happening. We have the WTO, again, taxation. What is e-commerce? What are services, on internet? How are they taxed? Which ones should be taxed? Which ones should not be? This is all being reflected right now in the talks about e-commerce at WTO. UNCTAD is talking about, digital economy, taxation, again, meetings on trade services, development, helping more on the best practices, but still, we absolutely need to monitor that and see what is being said, what is being taken forward. And then we have the United Nations Secretary General high-level panel on digital cooperation. That was put together last year, that will have its report soon in June. So we'll see what that report says and what is their view of going forward, talking about all of this cooperation about going digital. What does that mean? Who should be there? At what level? How do we take it forward? And other activities on, internet governance. Global Forum on Cyber Expertise, the GCSE that is about, awareness and understanding among the various cyberspace communities, Internet and Jurisdiction that some of you know, that talks about, jurisdiction and data, jurisdiction and content, and domains and jurisdiction. There's the Microsoft Tech Accord, the Paris Call for Trust and Security in Cyberspace, Tim Berners-Lee's Contract for the Web, Siemens Charter of Trust, the International Conference on Cyber Law, Cybercrime, and Cybersecurity, and they really come by the day. So, in between all of those, we also try to, look into what ICANN is doing, mostly the GAC, and, how issues of two-letter codes and new GTLDs and country names are aggravating governments and how they look into the technical community, because we're all together in this here. And then also there's this spat at IETF on DNS on HTTPS. I got 2 governments at ITU lately tell me that, well, if you're supposed to be figuring this out and you can't, what do you want us to do? So there's a lot out there. Thank you, and I'm here for questions now or around whenever you want.
Any questions for Anne Rochelle? Lengthy
Yes.
governance report, but good. Yes, Kevin.
Kevin Bloomberg, The Wire. Anne Rochelle, thank you for dealing with all the things that, quite frankly, make my head hurt. The one thing that I would, you mentioned during your talk was in regards to what happens if IP addresses are monetized and how governments view that monetization, and the story that we've given over the years and how we've operated. I think it might be important that during staff and legal, especially for a number of proposals moving forward, that perspective be given to the advisory council at a minimum, and possibly something to the community. But I think that the advisory council should see the global aspect of the things that go on in helping them weigh their decisions. And I don't know if that goes on today. It didn't when I was on the council, and I would suggest that that might be beneficial for everybody.
Yeah, sure.
Any other questions? Thank you, Anne Rochelle.
Thank you, John.